Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 557 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. I'm David Barr Kirtley, author of the book Save Me Please and Other Stories. Publishers Weekly says, visceral settings and robust characters will have readers marveling at how much Kirtley is able to fit into a limited page count. For SFF fans with no time to sink into a doorstopper, these concentrated doses of genre goodness will hit the spot. And Kirkus Reviews writes, Kirtley employs sharp, concise prose that complements his puckish sense of humor. The author's passionate voice breathes life into this wonderful array of tales. So again, the book is called Save Me Please and Other Stories, and it's available now on Amazon.com. And today on the show, we'll be discussing Baldur's Gate 3, a Dungeons & Dragons video game from Larian Studios, makers of Divinity Original Sin. And this will include spoilers for Baldur's Gate 3, but we'll be giving a spoiler warning before we get into any spoilers. And I'm joined today by our producer, John Joseph Adams. He's the editor of Lightspeed Magazine, and the series editor of the Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy, and he's also edited more than 40 other anthologies, including Out There Screaming, an anthology of new black horror, which he edited with Jordan Peele. He's also edited Dungeons & Dragons books for Monty Cook Games and Kobold Press, and he's played more than 1,000 hours of Baldur's Gate 3. So, John, welcome to the show.
Always good to be here. I had to pass a DC 25 persuasion check to get Dave to do this episode, so I hope you all are grateful.
Okay, so John, tell us about your expectations going into Baldur's Gate 3.
Well, to be honest, I didn't really have a lot of expectations because I typically avoid video games because of how obsessed with them I get. And so, I knew it was out there. I knew that there was a long early access period where it was kind of in beta and they were, fixing it as they go along. But I had avoided it all until then. But then, once it was about to come out, all my friends started talking about it on all my different Discords and stuff. And I'm like, oh, God, I'm going to have to play this game. It's a new D&D video game. I haven't played a D&D video game in forever. And I grew up with those, I think you did, too. So I mean, I had some high expectations because of that, but I had not played the Divinity games either. So, I didn't have the expectations of having played those. And I mean, they're very critically acclaimed, and I mean, I guess I'm going to have to play them now. But once I'm weaned off of Baldur's Gate, I guess.
It was funny. So. It was funny because I actually went through my email, and actually, when the Baldur's Gate 3 intro cinematic came out in 2020, I had sent it to you.
Yeah,
and so I had said, the subject line says, "Holy shit, this is so beautiful! It literally made me cry."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you responded, "Damn, that looks badass."
Yeah.
And then you also said, I'm almost afraid to play it. Will I be able to pry myself away from it once I do? Okay, I've got a couple of months to get really far ahead on work.
Well, I forgot about that. I do remember seeing the trailer and thinking it was amazing. But I forgot about all that. That's funny. Well, it didn't work. I was not adequately prepared when it came out.
Well, so because you had told me that you've played this game for more than 1,000 hours. I guess Steam or something tells you how many hours you've played. So I did the math, and 1,000 hours is working a 9-to-5 job for 6 months. And Baldur's Gate 3 came out 5 months ago.
Yeah.
So you've put more hours into this than a 9-to-5 job.
I mean, I'm not saying it was a reasonable thing to do. And I don't know what the true count is at this point because I've had to have Steam in offline mode for a while because there was a new patch and I didn't want to download it yet because it might break my mods. And I'm like, I'm gonna get patch 5 on my next playthrough. And so, it won't tell me how many hours I've accrued since I last talked to you about it. So, it's over 1,000, but I don't know how much.
Yeah. Well, you were saying that you grew up playing the Dungeons & Dragons computer games. And definitely, if anyone has any questions about Pool of Radiance, Curse of the Azure Bonds, Heroes of the Lance, Secret of the Silver Blades, Pools of Darkness, any of those, I will put my knowledge of those games up against anyone.
Yeah.
But I have not played any So the Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, the Infinity
Mm-hmm.
Engine games, they came out when I was in college, and I just did
Mm-hmm.
not have time to play CRPGs
Mm-hmm.
at that point in my life. And so I've not really played any Dungeons and Dragons games, for the last 20 years, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
Mm-hmm.
And I have not played Baldur's Gate 3 because I do not have a game console that will run it.
Mm-hmm.
I have an Xbox One. And actually, this game I just saw just today. It just came out on Xbox. But it's only Xbox Series X and S.
Yeah.
So even so, I still can't play it.
Yeah. Well, maybe Santa will bring you something.
I was going to say, if any of our listeners want to buy me a PlayStation 5, you can find information on how to do that over at geekscoutshow.com/crowdfunding.
Hey, I'll take one too if anyone's just buying PlayStation 5s. I mean,
But I did do a ton of research on this game. I've listened to tons of interviews and read tons of reviews and watched tons of YouTube videos and stuff. So I feel like I have a lot to contribute to this conversation, even not having played the game.
Yeah.
And obviously, John has played so much of the game that I figured he can fill us in on anything related to gameplay. And I was telling him, that I'm thinking of him in this panel as kind of like a war correspondent, where he's been embedded, for the last 5 months in Faerun or something.
Yeah.
So he's gonna, he can tell us everything we need to know about the
absolutely.
gameplay.
Yeah, absolutely. That is what I've been in on the ground, first person reporting. So I'm in a bunch of regular D&D games, and after the game came out, one of my DMs had to cancel a session. She said she got like a flat tire, and like we both live in the same city, so she was like saying this one road or whatever, and I was like joking with her after. I was like, I kind of thought maybe you got that flat tire on the road to Baldur's Gate, but, and she's like, "Oh no! If I was going to cancel the game to play Baldur's Gate, I would just say so." But I thought that was funny.
But so, John, I know that you've played the actual game a ton, but I don't know. Have you followed like the discourse around the game that much, or are you kind of like not really that up on what people have been saying about it?
No, I have a little bit. I mean, I've been looking at Baldur's Gate 3 Reddit, and I've seen some YouTube videos and stuff. I probably haven't watched the kind of videos that you watch, but like, the narrator has has done some like outtake videos that were really hilarious. And I know some of the voice actors have been like doing a playthrough and like streaming themselves playing it, that kind of thing. I haven't watched any of those yet because I'm too busy playing the game still. But yeah, I've been obsessively reading Reddit about it because it's like, hey, I can fill in some of my desire to play the game by looking at all this stuff. I did wait to do that until after I had finished it because I was dreadfully scared of spoilers. But now that I've played it so much, it's like, well, you can't spoil me for anything. Like at this point, it's like, it's fine, whatever. If I get spoiled on some minor thing that I somehow didn't discover, it's like, okay, well now I'm just thankful for it that I've experienced that one corner that I somehow missed.
Mm-hmm. But you're aware that this game is like a cultural phenomenon and just won like Game of the Year awards and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and also in totally awesome fashion, the head of the studio, when he went to go accept the award, he was wearing like a breastplate. Yeah. No, I have a whole thing about that. Yeah. That we're gonna get to. Yeah, I mean, I have not played enough games this year that came out this year to say whether or not any game is Game of the Year. I would be shocked if there was a game better than this. I mean, I know Starfield came out this year. But I've seen enough people say that like, oh, Bethesda had dropped the ball on that one, that it didn't live up to the hype. So, and everyone says Baldur's Gate has not only lived up to the hype, but far surpassed it. But I mean, for my money, like I have to say, like, it's hard to say when it's in the moment, but like, this is the best game I've ever played. I mean, video game. So yeah, I can't imagine. I can't think of a better game that I've ever played. It's so engrossing. It does so many things well. Although it's funny, if we did a whole episode breaking down everything I want to talk about this game, you could edit it in such a way that makes it sound like I was tearing it to shreds because there's a lot of problems with it. But that's the funny thing. It does everything else so well that, it it makes up for all of that. And it's like, there's serious like things where it's like, what the hell, guys? Like, how did you let this go? Or like, what is this bullshit? You know, there's a lot of like frustrating things that it's like, well, this could have easily been fixed and been awesome. But then everything else is just so amazing that it's like, still, I don't care. Best game ever.
So have you been following the Baldur's Gate 3 is too good discourse?
I not exactly, but I think I know what you mean. Like, you know, game devs saying like, oh, well, that was an outlier. Don't expect our games to be that good or that kind of thing. But I don't know if is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So there's been sort of panic in a lot of other game studios saying like, don't think that this is going to set the new standard and like all games are going to be like this going forward, that this was like it's just like this confluence of factors that made this game so successful that can't be easily replicated. Mm-hmm. So that's one sort of one aspect of it. But then the other aspect of it is that, you know, there's this enormous sort of groundswell or whatever you would say of hostility toward AAA game makers. And there's this sense that they've been just screwing over players with, you know, you buy the game and then it's like broken on launch day and you have to patch it. And then there's like all this bonus stuff you have to buy that seems like it really should have been part of the game to start with. And then, you know, all these things that people are really frustrated about and have been for years. And Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't have any of that stuff. And so there's this, you know, sort of like the peasants are revolting sort of feeling of like, if Larian, this indie studio, can put out such a high quality game without any of these things that we hate, why can't the big studios do that too? Right. So there's just been a lot of conversation around this game above and beyond just, you know, the details about the gameplay or the graphics or whatever, that it really is, you know, the focus of a lot of interesting discussions from all sorts of angles. Right.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, from in that regard, like, it surpasses my expectations of any video game in so many ways. Like in that regard, like the voice acting is amazing. You know, the animations of all of the characters and everything is amazing. Like it's like they did like all these full 3D modeling of everything. And so it's like any character that you see, like you can put any of these outfits on them and stuff. It's like there's a little clipping sometimes, so it's like it's not perfect in all ways, but it's like amazing. And then you know, with all the voice acting, it's like you can talk to any person and like any person has at least one line that is like a voice acted line, you know, and a lot of them have like a ton of stuff to say. So it's incredible. But then also the soundtrack, man, like I was shocked to see like Reddit seems to think that the soundtrack isn't that great. And I'm like, are you crazy? Like, what are you comparing it to? Like Mozart or some shit? Like, no, the soundtrack is so good.
No, I've been listening to the Devil song like over and over again.
Oh, yeah. No, that's amazing. And so like I was going to sort of put that in a spoiler area, but like that's a thing, like you should absolutely not listen to that song until you get to it in the game. Because it's like when you get to it in the game, it's just so epic. It's so unexpected. It's so perfect for the situation, you know, like I like honestly, like I think I started tearing up when I first heard it. I've gotten that way when I've listened to it later. Cause it's like, there's so like when you start to analyze it, it's like, it's so great. It's so perfect. And there's one funny thing about it, I guess there's one funny thing about it I should say for later, but, once we're under spoiler tags, but, yeah, it's just, they're so clever. Everything Larian did in this game, there's so many little clever touches. And this is one of them that I'm alluding to.
Well, and I'll say like, so it has the game has 176 hours of cinematics of cutscenes, and it's all fully mocapped, all professional voice actors. Do you know who any of the voice actors are? Did you see that?
I mean, I know some of the people who were like famous already that are in there, and I've seen all of the voice actors' names. I couldn't recite them for you. I know the guy Neil that did the voice of Astarion has been like winning a bunch of the awards for best voice acting. But like I know Jason Isaacs plays one of the villains, and J.K. Simmons plays one of the villains. So like those are the two. And Matt Mercer does a voice of a character in the game. Yeah, but it's a small part for Matt, but.
Yeah, so those are the ones I was going to mention. So that's cool. And
can I just say, Jason Isaacs, he surprised the hell out of me when I saw that he was the voice of the character that he voices. I mean, I don't know if we should say the name or not of the character, but I'm like Like I'd heard this voice so much in the game, I would have never identified Jason Isaacs. So it's like, well done on the voice acting, sir. Like completely disguised your voice in such a way that I would have never known it was you. You know, and I mean, same for Matt Mercer, but it's like he's just like by trade a voice actor, a vocal chameleon. Jason Isaacs is just like a regular actor that I wouldn't have said, oh yeah, he clearly has the range to sound like anything, you know, so well done.
Yeah. So this game just has production values that just blow away any other CRPG, you know, any other similar game of, you know, these are computer role playing games, you know, where you have a party and there's usually tactical combat and, you know, they tend to be a little bit niche, a little bit sort of, you know, like difficult to get into. And so the philosophy with this Baldur's Gate 3 game was basically like, you know, the Larian Studios was like, we think that a CRPG could reach a much larger audience if it had the right like AAA presentation. And, you know, and other people are kind of like, you're crazy. Like a CRPG is never going to sell enough copies to recoup that investment. And which gets us to the very colorful character of Swen Vincke, the founder of Larian Studios. So, other than the fact that he wears a breastplate, John, do you know anything about Swen Vincke?
Not much. I mean, I've seen some of the stuff he said about the game and stuff, and he seems great. I know when you go to make a character in the game, like the default name of it is Tav, T-A-V, and that's like short for Gustav, which is the name of his dog. I know that, but that's about all I know.
All right, so let me tell you about Swen Vincke. So, and I don't know if I mentioned Larian is a Belgian studio.
Yeah.
So he's Belgian, and so when he was growing up, he was really into Dungeons and Dragons and CRPGs. And one day he's talking to a friend of his who says, "Oh my God, there's this amazing CRPG I played where you can like do anything. The game will let you do anything you can imagine, and you can talk to characters and they'll just respond. Like no matter what you say, they'll respond to it." And he was like, "Wow, that game sounds amazing. I've got to play it." And then he found out that the friend was just like fucking with him, and he was just lying. There was no game like that, right?
Oh.
But so then, you know, a couple of years go by and he discovers Ultima 6 and Ultima 7. And he's like, holy shit, this is like kind of like what that kid said. You know, these games where you can go anywhere and do anything. And I mean, obviously in those games, just because of the technology, you can't say anything and the characters will respond and stuff like that. But if people know, I'm totally obsessed with Ultima. I've done many, many episodes of this podcast on Ultima. I worked a reference to Ultima into my wedding vows. That's how into Ultima I am. So yeah, like Ultima 6 and
you interviewed
Ultima,
Richard Garriott?
Yeah, I interviewed Richard Garriott, the creator of Ultima. And Ultima 6 and 7 are just two of my, like, are definitely my all-time favorite CRPGs. And, you know, among my top, you know, 5 favorite games of all time. So when I found that, and I had heard that a couple years ago that Swen Vincke was really into Ultima 7. So I kind of had a positive impression of him just based on that. But so anyway, so he sort of like spent his whole career trying to carry the torch forward of Ultima 7. This is a game where, you know, you can, like the whole world is so interactive. You know, if there's, you know, a candle, you can light it. If there's a wagon, you can ride in it. If there's a oven, you can cook stuff in it. If there's a fishing pole, you can fish with it. Like everything you can interact with. And after Origin closed, the company that made it, no games have really done that since. You know, like the graphics have gotten better and the action's gotten faster and stuff, but the level of interactivity has really decreased for the most part in all subsequent CRPGs. And so Swen Vincke really wanted to try to carry that aspect of the game forward as much as possible. But it's been kind of a rocky road. You know, the company, Larian, they made 2 games, Divine Divinity and Divinity 2. And both of those
Divinity
were...
Original Sin.
No, this is before that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. No, they've been on the Divinity thing for a long time.
Oh, okay. Didn't even know about those other ones.
Yeah, so the first game was supposed to be called Divinity, but the publisher said they'd had a big success with some game with an alliterative title. And so they said it had to have an alliterative title. So they changed the name to Divine Divinity. And he's like, it's so stupid, but you know, this is, and they had a lot of problems working with publishers. And so, you know, and he wanted to make these really ambitious games, but they kept getting pushed out the door before they were ready and getting really mixed, you know, reviews because of that. And so he was finally able to make the game that he wanted, which was Divinity Original Sin. And they were able to do that largely because of Kickstarter. There had been the Pillars of Eternity. Kickstarter had been really successful, which sort of was a proof of concept that the Kickstarter could be used for CRPGs. And so they got $1 million for Divinity Original Sin. But unfortunately, it cost several $1 million. And so it was really tight toward the end of the development. They were like not paying taxes and like taking out all these loans and everything. So it was going to be really, really bad news if and because he really wanted to add voice acting to the game. That was like the last thing that they needed to pay for. So it was going to be really bad news if the game wasn't a big hit. And fortunately for him, it was a big hit. And so then they did Divinity Original Sin 2, and that was also a really big hit. Mm-hmm. And he had previously approached Wizards of the Coast about doing Baldur's Gate 3, and they had said no, that they had said, we don't think your company is big enough or established enough. We don't think you'll be able to pull it off. But then Divinity Original Sin 2 looked so promising that Wizards came back to him and said, okay, we've changed our mind. We want you to do Baldur's Gate 3. So it's like this amazing kind of like decades-long story for him, just having this dream to create the ultimate RPG and finally making it happen. All that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that's crazy about the Wizards of the Coast thing is that, so like I had heard all of that about how he had approached them and been turned down and all that. But then, so the game comes out and it's like Baldur's Gate 3 is on the top title, that's all the branding. I see Larian Studios branding. Where is the Dungeons and Dragons branding in this game? Like, I don't see Dungeons and Dragons anywhere. Like, there's like a little spot on the bottom of like this splash launch screen that says like Wizards of the Coast, like next to like Larian Studios, but it's like, it's very small. It's like, you would think that, I mean, if I was Wizard of the Coast, I'd be like, I want Dungeons and Dragons above Baldur's Gate 3, like : Baldur's Gate 3. This is our property, And I've heard people say that maybe they were trying to hedge their bets in case it didn't pan out as well as everyone was hoping. But I mean, it just seems crazy. Like, how can you not have your branding on there? Because it's like, I can imagine people, I mean, everyone's going to like go to the internet and they'll find out that it's a Dungeons and Dragons game, but I could totally see how you could just get wind of the game. Everyone loves it and you play it and love it and don't even realize, hey, I could have this same experience or similar experience by playing Dungeons and Dragons. You wouldn't even know that it's related. So it's funny.
Yeah, I didn't hear any discussion of that, so I don't know. I mean, that does seem really weird. I bet if it was a hedging their bets kind of thing, I bet they're kicking themselves now.
Yeah.
But
well,
yeah.
One of the other things that they should be kicking themselves for is that like they don't have anything ready to go right now to capitalize on the success of this game. Like, if they were smart, they would have a campaign that, so Baldur's Gate 3 goes from level 1 to level 12, and then that's where it caps. That's where you finish the game at level 12. If Wizards of the Coast was smart, they'd have a campaign book that you could buy right now that would take you from levels 13 to 20 that would continue the story of Baldur's Gate 3, like 6 months after it or whatever, like a new adventure, but with the same sort of, history that you played through in the game. Like, obviously there's a lot of different paths that you can take to get to the end of the game, but still, I mean, that's what a DM would juggle. So
that's a brilliant idea. Yeah, they 100% should have done that. I mean, Swen Vincke has said that the reason this computer game ends at level 12 is because it's like so hard to implement the Dungeons & Dragons rules for characters above that level. The spells are so powerful and so flexible and everything that, this is pretty much what you can do on a computer right now is the first 12 levels for D&D.
I know. I'd seen that too, and I thought it was funny that he was saying that because it's like the people who made Baldur's Gate 3 are complaining about like the challenges of balancing games. Dude, there are so many like just bizarrely overpowered items and stuff in this game. It's crazy. Like coming to it from D&D 5th edition, it's like oh whoa, like this thing is crazy overpowered.
All right, well let's save our criticism for a little bit later.
That's not even a criticism, really. It's just it's just the fact. I mean, I don't mind. It's fun.
I saw a thing where, I don't know, did you play, there was like they did release a D&D, pen and paper module that led into Baldur's Gate 3. Did you play that? Or do you know?
Yeah, Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. I have not played it. I have really wanted to, and I just never got a DM that wanted to run it. Now I want to play it even more. But it's certainly not necessary to, for any background or anything. But like, I think if you had played it, there's probably more, sort of bits of lore that you would pick up on. Like, they reference in the game how the city of El Terrell, got pulled into Avernus. And I'm pretty sure that's what happens in that module. But yeah, no, I haven't played it.
Mm-hmm. I guess just the other thing I want to say about Swen Vincke, going back to the breastplate thing, is that, he wears this breastplate a lot in like press events and, like funny Larian videos and stuff like that. And so, in the Ultimate games, Richard Garriott would always dress up in kind of Renaissance outfits and play this character, Lord British, who was a character in the games. And I remember when we first started doing this show, I remember talking to Ron Gilbert, the creator of Secret of Monkey Islands, because I had, in our interview with him, I had read this quote years ago where it said something like, if it seems like a lot of the magic has gone out of games, maybe it's because they used to be made by a man in a cape, and now they're made by executives in suits who do lunch. And, alluding to Richard Garriott, that's the man in the cape. And so I feel like Swen Vincke is kind of bringing back the spirit of, of Richard Garriott and, being the, sort of having the LARP, nerd kind of, persona for creating CRPGs. So I like that a lot. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure he would love to, be known as like the next Richard Garriott, or just be mentioned in the same sentence as him. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So John, why don't you tell us a little bit about the non-spoiler story? Like, what is just sort of the basic setup of the game?
So the game starts with you, your character, you're abducted by mind flayers, and you're on a nautiloid, which is one of their like ships that goes between. It's basically a spaceship, and it's all covered in like. It's got like tentacles and like all kinds of weird membranes and stuff inside. It's like a living ship kind of. And so you have this they call it a mind flayer tadpole that like crawls into your eye. Like that's like the first cinematic in the game is this first person thing. This mind flayer comes up to you and puts this tadpole in your eye, and this thing it crawls into your brain and eventually it turns you into a mind flayer. And that's bad because it basically means like you would be dead and you would become this other thing, and there would be some fragments of your personality left, but like you would lose all emotions and generally just not a thing. Plus, mind flayers are like these like sort of squid faced people that are sort of notoriously evil in Forgotten Realms. So that's how it begins. You have to like collect some companions of people who also got abducted and were on the ship, and so you have to get off the ship. And then the ship sort of crashes, and you land up on a beach. And then you collect one of your other companions. You find your other companion, one of the other companions, and then it's that kind of thing where like you pick up different people as you go along. But from there, it's like you kind of do like a lot of exploring. It feels very much like D&D where you have a lot of different options at your disposal. The first big thing you do is you find this Druid's Grove that's under assault from goblins, and so you have to sort of protect the Druid Grove, unless you want to help the goblins, because you can totally play it evil as well. I couldn't bring myself to do it, but I wanted to experience as much of the game as I could, so I was like, I should do an evil playthrough, but I'm like, man, this feels real bad. No, I don't like it at all. Especially when it's like you've played it through as good a number of times, and it's like, hey, these people are my friends.
And
but,
so, and so we know, John, from our review of Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, that you're a bit of a stickler when it comes to the Dungeons and Dragons rules. So, how did you feel as a D&D fan playing this game? How well did you feel that it kind of captured that aspect of the game?
Well, it does a fantastic job of capturing it. It feels a lot like D&D. There are a lot of differences where they had to make a change, like to adapt it to a video game. Sometimes the changes were puzzling, where it's like, I don't understand why they changed that. And like, just for instance, as an example, in D&D, getting knocked prone is not like a huge deal. It's like you have to use half your movement to stand up on your turn. When you're prone, people get advantage to hit you. You have disadvantage to hit them. So it's like, it's not that big of a deal. In Baldur's Gate 3, if you get knocked prone and you haven't taken an action yet, you lose your turn. And if you're a spellcaster and you're concentrating on a spell, if you get knocked prone, you automatically break your concentration. Those are both huge, huge changes to the way the action economy in 5e works. 5e meaning 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So like those are like just some of the changes. But then also it's like some of the changes are good. In D&D, you can't cast 2 leveled spells on the same turn, meaning like a spell that's like a first level spell is like a low power spell, and then like a 5th level spell would be a higher power level spell. So like in D&D, you can't cast one with your action and one with your bonus action on the same turn. But in Baldur's Gate 3, they let you do that. And it's like, it opens up this whole other way of playing, and it just seems more fun. And so that would be something I'd love for, D&D to just like relax on and let us do. So, I mean, those are some things.
Yeah. I guess one thing I didn't get a super clear sense of from the stuff that I watched was how, sort of, how what's the word? Sort of foregrounded the rules are when you're playing the game. Like how much do you know about the rules? Because I know that you actually roll dice, and there's like literal dice that roll on the screen and stuff. But like, could you learn how to play? Could you learn the rules of Dungeons and Dragons from playing this game, or is a lot of it sort of hidden from the player?
Right. I think most of it is there on the screen at some point. They certainly could do a better job of making some of the rules clear, or how certain items work, how certain spells work. Even coming from 5e, sometimes I'm like, well, wait, how does this work? Like, and like I'm looking at the die rolls, like in the combat log, to be like, wait, what? And I'm trying to figure out like, how does this thing actually work? Just as an example, again, Sleet Storm is a spell in 5e that like it basically sucks. It's really hard to find a good use for it. In Baldur's Gate 3, it's so awesome. Like, so basically it casts this, it casts a sleet storm on the ground. It's this huge area. It turns the whole area to like icy ground. And when you walk across it, you have to make a saving throw, or else you slip and fall. And as discussed, when you get knocked prone in this game, it's very punishing. Well, it's like, as you're walking across it, it's like you have to make the saving throw like literally every 5 feet or something, because people just slip and fall in it all the time. Like when you cast it, it's like a big time lockdown area of effect, just like control thing happening. It's like a baller move. Like, hey, I'm going to throw this down. Like, yeah, good luck getting past that. I mean, if they can teleport or whatever, they can get past it. But, there's like whole encounters that you can just solve by casting Sleet Storm. It's like, that's it. That's all you need to do. It's done now. Like really gnarly ones too. And how that works is actually pretty opaque in the game. It's like you read the spell description. It's not really clear how exactly it works. I've thought about like writing and running a campaign for just for my friends and stuff that does what I was saying Wizards of the Coast should have done, which is like pick up the story and run it after what happens in Baldur's Gate 3. But I wanted to port some of the rules from Baldur's Gate, the different rules from Baldur's Gate 3 into the playthrough, or into the game. It's not playthrough when you're playing D&D, you're just playing the game. But that, like, one of the things I was trying to figure out, I was like, well, how would I even figure out how does Sleet Storm work? Because it's like, it's not clear. So yeah, I don't think you could really learn how. I mean, a lot of the rules you could pick up, it would feel very familiar once you start playing D&D, if you've played a lot of Baldur's Gate, because most of the rules are there. It's just a matter of like, translating what you've done in the game to, what you see on the page in your character sheet. So, yeah.
Well, when you're talking about the Sleet Storm being sort of, like so powerful, and people have to keep, making checks over and over again and stuff like that. I mean, it does seem like this is, part of the design philosophy of Flaring is to give the player maximum freedom and, make the systems so flexible that, anything you can imagine, you can see if it works and stuff.
Right.
But it does seem like that makes the game pretty like cheesable, pretty,
Oh, for sure. Yes. I mean, on Reddit, you can see people talking about cheese things all the time. And like, I haven't done any things like that. Like I'll try to make builds that are like powerful and like take advantage of like, different combinations and stuff. But like, that's not cheese. That's just like optimizing a build. Like, people are talking about like, oh, I collect up all these explosive barrels and I sneak in and I put them all around this area and then I just light them up and cause this huge explosion. I'm like, oh, okay, I mean, sure, I guess you could do that, but that just seems like you're cheating.
Yeah. Well, there are two YouTube videos I wanted to mention that I watched. One is called "Can You Beat Baldur's Gate 3 Without Killing Anything?" And "Can You Beat Baldur's Gate 3 Without Long Resting?" And you would think that it would be absolutely impossible to beat a CRPG without doing either of those things, because that's like most of what you do in most CRPGs. But because these systems are so flexible, there's a lot of you actually can get through the whole game. Like basically skipping most encounters.
Yeah. So I could see that working for a lot of it, but I'm really puzzled how you could do it with some of it. I feel like some of it would certainly be unsatisfying from a heroic level. If you can't like stop the bad guys by killing them, because like some of them you're just not going to be able to talk down. Although a surprising number of them you can. Like there's certain like encounters that are like would be a major encounter if you fought them, but there are dialogue options that you can talk your way out of it, and it's challenging. It's like you have to be pretty good at persuasion to do it, or deception, because it's like you have to make a series of checks and like you have to navigate, what are you saying to them, and making an intelligent decision based on what they're saying to you. So yeah, it's really interesting in that regard. Yeah, and the long resting doesn't surprise me as much, although it does seem hard to imagine.
Well, so I'm curious, since you're such an esteemed editor, what do you think of, speaking of like the dialogue and characters and stuff, what do you think about the quality of the writing of the game? I mean, obviously it's good, but is it like great for a CRPG, or is it like great for, what does it even compare to like TV shows or books or stuff like that?
No, yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I would say that it compares in quality to any kind of entertainment. I don't know that you could translate it directly to some other medium and have it be natural or whatever. It's hard to judge it in that regard, but I mean, it's fantastic. Like, honestly, like once I became an editor, I did worry about playing these kind of games if I was going to feel like, like the stories aren't up to snuff from my, my understanding of story at the level I have to understand it to be an editor, and all these kinds of things. But, this game just really like, it just takes it to a whole new level. I mean, obviously there are things that I would have made editorial suggestions on if I was editing like the dialogue of the game. And hey, Larry, and if you ever want me to do that, I'd be happy to do that. Like totally, like anything you guys want me to do, I'm down. And I mean, actually, most of the complaints I would have in that regard are like, why isn't there another dialogue option to say this thing? Because this is a perfectly reasonable thing for a person to say in response to this. But then I'm stuck with these 4 options. I'm like, well, none of these are really, I mean, okay, I guess I'll pick this one, know? And I mean, that's how all of these things are going to be to some extent, because they can't imagine everything, but they do so well with the whole game that like, when you find one of those moments, you're like, oh, well, come on. Why can't I say this other thing though?
So do you know anything about the people who wrote this game?
No, not really. I believe I looked up the writer, and the lead writer is Adam Smith. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything about him. I want to meet him. I want to know about him, though.
Yeah, so I found a list of all the writers, or at least, I don't know if this is completely exhaustive, but there's 20 writers on this list. So there are at least 20 writers who worked on this game. And yeah, and Adam Smith is credited as lead writer. And as far as I could tell, most of the people, have not published like novels or, screenplays or things, maybe I missed some stuff, but I didn't know any of the writers, like Adam Smith, he used to write for Rock, Paper, Shotgun, he's like a games journalist. There was at least one other games journalist I saw, Kevin Van Ord.
Didn't Smith also work on Divinity Original Sin 1 or 2, or maybe both? Didn't he write for them too? I know a lot of the same team worked on those games too.
I think he just came on for Baldur's Gate 3, but a lot of all these writers had worked on their previous games.
Same with the voice actors.
So the one person I found who seems to have a big sort of presence as a writer outside of gaming is this guy Lawrence Schick.
He worked on this?
Yeah, he's the principal narrative designer.
Oh shit. Okay, well that kind of makes sense.
So what do you know about Lawrence Schick?
Yeah, so he was, if I'm remembering correctly, he was also like the lead lore master or whatever, like on Elder Scrolls. So, he has all that experience. Plus, he was like an old school guy who worked on TSR D&D stuff back in the day. Like he has a whole list of credits. Like he wrote a bunch of like the classic modules and stuff.
Yeah, so he wrote the well-known module White Plume Mountain.
Right.
And he worked on the original Dungeon Master's Guide, Deities and Demigods, and Fiend Folio. But do you know about his career as Lawrence Ellsworth?
No.
Okay, so check this out. So as Lawrence Ellsworth, he writes historical fiction, and he taught himself French so that he could do his own translations of the Three Musketeers novels. And then he's written a whole bunch of other Three Musketeers novels, like filling out the world and continuing the story and stuff like that. And he's also edited a book called The Big Book of Swashbuckling Adventure, where this is stories by like Arthur Conan Doyle and Alexandra Dumas and stuff, I think mostly 19th century stories. And he also wrote a book called Cinema of Swords, where it's like his opinions of 400 of the most popular movies that involve sword fights. So he's got a lot going on. So
he also had an essay in one of my Kobold Press essay anthologies.
Cool. But for the most part, it seems like they have taken the strategy of just recruiting people who are really into gaming.
Yeah.
Rather than like seeking out people who are like well-known screenwriters or anything like that.
Hey, though, if you can have both and you want an editor that is super into gaming, has played D&D his whole life, and also is like, edited more than 40 anthologies, like I'm here, guys.
Although I don't know, we are going to get into some criticisms, so maybe they should stop listening now. They should hire you now before we get into the.
No, I think everything I've learned about this company and playing this game suggests to me that they are actually they want criticism. They want to know what they did wrong and they want to try to fix it. They've made so many patches and like hot fixes and stuff of like all kinds of so much stuff, man. It's like it's crazy how much. Like the game when it launched was totally fine. Most developers would have just left it at that. And it's like, but they want it to be awesome. And they're clearly listening to the community and stuff. So, I think they would welcome it.
Yeah. I mean, like we mentioned, this game spent 3 years in early access. So they were, collecting feedback and fine tuning it that whole time. And I think part of that was just because of COVID and it kind of like delayed things, but they do definitely seem to be really into, incorporating community feedback into the design. Yeah. And they did. I mean, like one of the complaints was that the game sort of ended a little too abruptly and they actually patched it with this whole like epilogue that, it was like another gigantic, gigabytes of content, like filling out the end of the game.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, okay, if they were going to fix things that were wrong in the game, like with the mechanics or whatever, or like something didn't work right, like you understand that. But like they made whole new cinematics with voice acting and stuff. Like that's mind boggling that they did that. And I love them for it because like the epilogues definitely seem warranted. I haven't seen them yet because because that's patch 5 and I'm waiting to play patch 5 stuff with my next playthrough. But I'm looking forward to it.
So what are some of your critiques of the game?
I mean, like I said, some of the stuff just seems like ridiculously overpowered. But that's coming at it from. I mean, that's coming at it from a 5e point of view. But then also, I think it's true even if you're not a 5e person. Like there's certain like items in there that just seem ridiculous on the surface based on the world of Baldur's Gate 3. And so there's a lot of stuff like that you can just totally make super broken builds. And I guess one criticism is that like, so there's 3 difficulty levels. There's like Explorer, which is easy, and then Balance, which is medium, and then Tactician, which is hard. And, I mean, obviously I come from 5e, so like maybe it would be easier. The game would be easier for me than it would be for somebody who just came to it without that experience. But, I thought it was pretty easy on Balanced. And then when I shifted to Tactician, I thought it was a little hard at first, but then it's like, I don't know. It just seems it seems pretty easy to me. There are some mods that can make it more difficult. I haven't messed with those yet, just because I'm like, well, I don't want it to be annoying and frustrating. But the base game, the way it is, I feel like it's pretty easy to make it easy.
I mean, my understanding is that they already patched it to add more harder difficulty levels.
Well, that's true. In patch 5, they gave some of the bosses like legendary actions or some, different kinds of powers to make them more badass. Yeah. And again, I haven't experienced that part of it yet.
So do you have other criticisms besides the unbalanced stuff?
Yeah, so some, like I said, there's some dialogue options and stuff that you wish were there. One of the big story things is that, so are we going to go under spoiler cover here, or do we want to wait for that? Because like one of the criticisms is a major story beat.
Yeah. Why don't we give a spoiler warning at this point?
Okay. Okay. So from here on, spoilers are fine.
Yeah. So from here on, spoilers are a go. Any spoilers are
here?
Okay.
There be spoilers.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the major storyline that runs through the game is that so you get this mind flayer parasite, and then eventually this dream visitor starts talking to you in your head. Like you have dreams, and this dream visitor is talking to you, and that person says, that they're fighting this war against like some sort of cosmic forces. You're like on the astral plane when you're talking to them, and it's like they're under assault, and they're protecting you from turning into a mind flayer, because you would have normally turned into a mind flayer like within a couple of days or something. I can't remember, or a week or whatever, in a pretty short time span. And like by the time you talk to the dream visitor, you've already survived much longer than that,
like 1,000 hours.
Yeah. So this dream visitor talks to you for a while, and then eventually they're revealed to actually be a mind flayer, and that had been disguising themselves. And he calls himself the Emperor. It's explained in the game why he's called that, but whatever. So there's that. But then as you go along, like you have a choice. Are you going to side with the Emperor and like trust him because he's been helping you all along, or are you not going to trust him because he's a mind flayer? But there's like other options that you can pick. One of them is, so the way he's protecting you is there's a Githyanki prince from legend named Orpheus, who he's like trapped in this thing called an astral prism, and the mind flayer is using this. He's tapping into the power of Orpheus to protect us from the mind flayer transformation. Okay, and so you can either side with Orpheus or you can side with the Emperor. Basically, there's a third option too, but let's not talk about that for now. But so if you side with the Emperor, it all kind of makes sense when you get to the end. If you side with Orpheus, the Emperor makes a completely whack decision that I cannot understand. So the entire game, okay, so there's a cult of the Absolute being this new god that is turning Faerun on its head. And so it turns out that the Absolute is an Elder Brain, which is like it's almost like a godlike entity that in Mind Flayer in the world of Mind Flayers, but it's an enormous brain. It has incredible psionic powers. So it's kind of godlike. Well, as it turns out, it's something even more powerful than that, called a Nether Brain. It's influenced by this magic from this very powerful magic item. But so you're playing this whole game. You're fighting against the Nether Brain, the Absolute, all of that, and the Emperor's on your side all along it. And he's fighting for his freedom as well as your freedom. And so it kind of makes sense. If you side with Orpheus, he says he has no choice but to join forces with the Nether Brain. I'm like, bro, what? We've been fighting against the Nether Brain this whole time, and now you're just going to join with the Nether Brain? And it just seems kind of crazy to me. One of the dialogue things that I hoped for was regarding this shift here, because it's like, when you go get this item that you need to free Orpheus, he freaks out. And I feel like you can just say to him, like, just because you go get that item, you don't necessarily have to turn on him. Like, but you can't tell him that. And I'm like, hey, look, I've trusted you all this way. Can you just trust me for a minute? Like, I wanted to go there and get the cool stuff that I knew was in this location, and by the time you can get it, that there's some cool stuff in that location. So yeah, that's one of the big story criticisms.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine with a story that's this complicated and 20 different writers over 6 years and stuff, that maybe some of the things just stop making, stop making sense for some of the many storylines.
Yeah.
I'll say like some of the criticisms I watched a video called like it was called something like reviewing 1-star Baldur's Gate reviews. It's called Going Over 1-Star Baldur's Gate 3 Reviews. Because you're like, how could you give this game 1 star? And so, like, by far the most common criticism was that people thought that there was too much romance or too graphic sex, or that it was like, scare quotes, pushing an agenda with all the sex and, liberated sexuality and stuff like that.
Not surprising.
So... Yeah. So what did you think of the sex in the game?
Well, yeah, it is a very horny game. I will say that. Yeah. And they have had to do patches to make some of the characters less horny. Cause like I mentioned, you collect these companions and like you can have like, I don't know, like 6 or 8 companions at some point, but you can only ever have 4 in your party. And so the rest of them are hanging out at your camp, but you can go talk to them whenever you want. Like you can go to camp whenever you want, even if you're not going to take a rest. And so when you talk to them, you gain approval from them. And then, so once you reach certain stages of approval, like maybe they start to like you or whatever. And it's like, man, can't I just talk to you like a friend? Like I'm trying to be nice to you because I like you. I don't want to fuck you. But like this one guy, Gale, he's the wizard. He's like sort of notorious for just being like the horniest. Like or falls in love easily. Let's say he always wants to fuck you. And it's like, come on, man! I thought we were just having a nice time, nice discussion. You were teaching me about magic, Like I didn't mean for it to go this far. And one of the other characters, Will, inevitably, even if you hardly talk to them, I feel like I always end up with this scene where like he just, he makes his move and like the scene starts with him like doing this little dance and you can watch or you can leave or you can be an asshole to him, whatever. But like if you're nice to him, it's like you dance with him and then it comes to like, oh, let's try a more intimate style. And then so you can do that or not, but then, and you can kind of like try to let him down easy, but it doesn't really work. And if you just say like, oh, this has gone too far, I need to leave. The look on this guy's face, Dave, like he's so heartbroken. I felt so bad. Like, why is this game going to make me feel so bad about a romance thing? Come on.
And some of the sex scenes are super graphic.
They are super graphic. Yeah.
So
so like there's an evil companion named Minthara, and I got far enough in my evil playthrough to get her on my team, and oh boy, yeah, it's graphic. It's like it's got a 69 happening and everything. It's like it goes everywhere on that. Actually, the romance with Karlach actually gets pretty graphic too when you get to the sex scene. Karlach being my favorite and the hardest one, it seems like, to romance. Man, it took me a long time to get her to like me.
Yeah, and she's some sort of like demon or something.
She's a tiefling. It's positioned at the start where Will is like a demon hunter and he's hunting her, but he was led to believe that she was actually some kind of demon, but she's just a tiefling. She was in the Hells, but she was like a servant of one of the archdevils unwillingly. And so they all make up and they're friends now. But yeah, she's just a tiefling.
Yeah.
Although she does have an infernal engine in her chest as a heart, and so like that's her like backstory quest basically, is to try to fix that, because otherwise she's going to die.
Yeah, so I don't imagine I would mind any of the graphic sex or anything, but there were enough people complaining about it that I did wonder if there should just be like a option in a menu somewhere for the like, combat quest only, no romance game playthrough.
Right. I mean, so you can turn off the graphic part. I guess maybe you can't. I guess you can't turn off the romance part, but you can turn off the graphic part. So like, I don't know what I mean. Maybe there's still sex scenes in that case, and then it just sort of fades to black earlier or something. But I don't know what people are complaining about if you can turn off the really sexy parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, obviously not a big concern for me, but is something that other people mentioned.
So can I just say on the subject of sex, one of the things they added in patch 5 was dick jiggle physics.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So. Important stuff, guys. They're doing important work.
You want to just go into explain what that means?
Well, your characters all have genitals and stuff, and so and you can pick them actually. So it's like if you're trans or something, you can totally represent yourself that way. But so if your character has a penis, previously it didn't really move very much. If you're running around camp naked or the world naked, you could do that too. Nobody ever acknowledges that you're naked, which is a little weird, but yeah, you can, and so your penis was pretty static, but then now they've added dick jiggle, so if you move the character around a certain way, there's going to be a jiggle, it's going to act like a penis should when exposed to certain force. I don't know if they did that to breasts too, because I know the breasts were very static as well, but I have that to look forward to.
Actually, that reminds me. So 2 of the YouTube videos I was going to mention is one is called Baldur's Gate 3 Sex Speed Run in 1 minute and 58 seconds. Uh-huh. So it's possible to have sex with somebody 1 minute and 58 seconds into the game if you play your cards right.
Yeah. Okay.
And then another one is called What Happens When You Steal an NPC's Underwear.
Yeah.
I don't know if did you ever try that?
No, I've never done stealing stuff. Although if you kill Minthara, and well, I don't think this always happens, but I have a mod now that is an auto loot mod, because I've played it through so many times at this point. It's the thing that's a drag now is looting all the crates and stuff. And it's look, I have to loot the crates, so this mod will allow me to do that with less annoyance. I've done my time looting, okay? The natural way. This is just going to help me now. But so when I have this mod on, when you kill Minthara, because she is a possible companion, it just strips her naked. So I have stolen her underwear because of that, but I haven't actually stolen an NPC's underwear.
Yeah, in this video,
happens?
It made it sound like you can't really. I mean, you try to do it, and they always say "Hey, stop that," or "What are you doing?" Things like that.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think also.
I mean, you shouldn't really be able to steal underwear if they're wearing clothes. How would you?
Yeah, I think also they patched it to make it so you can't have sex with anyone 1 minute and 58 seconds into the game.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they did slowly reduce horniness throughout. But then let's see another. I guess another criticism. I actually didn't see anyone say this, but this was one thing that sort of occurred to me is that. I saw a scene where there's a stand-up comedian. I don't know if you ever encountered this person. Yeah.
But some of the jokes are. I'll tell you what some of the jokes you can pick or that people say is I wouldn't be here tonight except my wife ran off with a Cambion. That's right, I got fiend zoned instead of friend zoned, right?
Right.
And then I tried sleeping with a dragonborn the other night, but it didn't work out. He had a reptile dysfunction.
Well, people didn't like those?
Well, I don't. So my feeling is I'm fine with because they're jokes that
reference
reference Earth-based things, right? Like erectile dysfunction and friend zone presumably doesn't exist in Faerun,
right?
So I mean those terms don't.
Yeah.
And so so it just kind of is sort of fourth wall breaking, and so it depends to me if the story is overtly a humorous kind of thing, like Robert Asprin Smith series, in which case I have no problem with it. But if it's something serious like Game of Thrones or something, I don't want things that are breaking the fourth wall that much in the story.
Yeah.
So
it's also though hard to tell a joke in the world of Faerun without making some kind of reference that in real life. I mean, I guess you could, but it'd be much more challenging. So I have some sympathy.
Yeah, well, come on, they had 20 writers. They could have come up with some some Faerun humor.
Get Stephen Colbert on there. He loves this shit. I'm sure he'd write some jokes for you. I mean, hell, they Orson Scott Card one time got hired to write jokes or insults for a game, right? You can hire somebody for
Secret of Monkey Island,
Yeah, you could hire somebody to write a very niche part of a game. just get him to write some jokes for you. Yeah.
And then, the other big criticism I saw was that this was too different from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. That, that it's a good game. That if it had been Divinity Baldur's Gate or something, these people wouldn't have had a problem with it, but that they felt like it was a little bit, questionable or disrespectful to the original designs or something to make it so different in a game called Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah. Well, whatever. I mean, this kind of thinking is why D&D has all these sacred cows that continue into the game to this day that really should have been discarded at some point. It's because like some old grognards are like, oh, well, hey, this is how it's always been. This is how it should always be. And it holds back like the game from making good changes and stuff. And so it's like, I mean, come on, those Baldur's Gate games were from so many years ago. Like, of course, it's going to be completely different now. I mean, I know a lot of people even before the game came out, they were like, "Man, if they make it turn based, it's just gonna tank. It's never going to work in the contemporary environment." And so I saw people on Reddit saying, like, "Boy, this comment really aged well." And I mean, for one, I'm thrilled that it's turn-based now. So like, I hope it warrants a whole new return to turn-based games. Cause like, I don't want this live action shit like D&D, like especially if it's a D&D game, like D&D is like a turn-based game. But yeah, so like, I don't know. I actually never did play Baldur's Gate 1 or 2. It was, it also came out, at a time when I just wasn't playing D&D at all. And I wasn't, really playing video games. I think it was also when I was in college. I did, in desperation one night, I did download both of them because Steam kept recommending to them. And it was like, enhanced edition. I'm like, oh, it's enhanced now. So surely it'll be at least playable. Man, it's not playable now. It's like, it's so old.
Yeah,
I couldn't do it.
Just to explain, so Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, rather than being turn-based combat, it's real-time with pause. So you can like pause and give your characters orders, and then, but everything else, the combat sort of proceeds in real time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess like, I think overall this Baldur's Gate 3 is such a triumph. But I think that one thing that is a little bit like unfortunate is that you have all these guys who worked on the Infinity Engine games like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale and Planescape Torment, those kinds of things. So like, Brian Fargo, Fergus Urquhart, Chris Avallone, Trent Oster, all these guys who like have sort of like been carrying the torch for CRPGs through the dark ages of the sort of 2005 to 2015 or something, that were not involved in this Baldur's Gate 3, even though they had put so much work in and, tried to, there were like all sorts of attempts to get Baldur's Gate 3 going, and they all just kind of fell through over the years. Yeah. So in a perfect world, somehow all those guys could have been involved with this, I guess. But
and that's fair. That's a fair criticism. I mean, especially since they got, Lawrence Schick on board, and he's done a bunch of other stuff. Like they could have gotten one of the guys from the game series, like instead of him. I mean, not that I think that they should have gotten somebody else, but I mean, if they wanted to involve somebody, but they only had one slot, they could have got people from that team. That's a fair point. Especially since they do borrow a lot of the characters. Like, for instance, so Jaheira, Minsk, Saravok, and what's her name? Viconia Devere. They're all characters from the original Baldur's Gate games. And they can all be companions. And so... so they're all in this game. And I know one of the criticisms I've seen online too is that Viconia, for instance, is very different from what you see in the Baldur's Gate games. And like some of the people kind of felt like betrayed by the portrayal of her now. Like I said, I haven't played them, so I can't speak to that in that regard. She's definitely like full on villain in this iteration. I think she was only ever a companion option if you were playing evil anyway in the other games. But yeah, I was kind of shocked to see Saravok was ever a companion option. He's like the son of the god of murder. So I'm like, oh, okay. Which actually, we should also mention too that the game, you can make your own character, or you can play one of the companions. They call them origin characters. Or there's an option called the Dark Urge, which is it's a custom character like any other, but you have these dark urges that happen during the game that you can either indulge or try to fight against. And so it actually ends up being a really cool playthrough. I was hesitant about it at first because I didn't have the stomach for playing an evil playthrough. And I tried one and abandoned it pretty early on because like there's most of the urges you can fight against, but there's this one urge that happens pretty early on that you can't skip without cheese. So if you're just playing without cheese, like, you can't skip this. And it's like, it's really viscerally upsetting. And you're like, oh man, I don't want to do this. But if you can get past it, like that playthrough is really cool and has a lot of interesting twists and turns to it that the base game doesn't have. I can say what it is if you want me to just spoil that too.
Yeah, I mean we're into spoilers, so
okay,
so go for it.
So when you go to deal with this Druid Grove, even if as Dark Urge you help them, which you totally can. You like I played it as a Dark Urge fighting against his urges, trying to redeem himself, whatever. And so even if you help them, the night after, so like you help them, you fight off the goblins, and then there's this big party at your camp, and this always happens in the game. And so the night after the party, this bard that was at the druid camp comes up to you, and she's like, "Oh, hey, I was inspired by everything that you did, and I think I'd like to make a go at being an adventurer. Is it all right if I join your camp?" And it's like, so you're like, yeah, sure, yeah, okay, yeah, come along, and then you go to sleep that night, and then when you wake up in the middle of the night, and you've just like completely butchered this girl. It's like you've painted a ritual circle on the ground in her blood. Her blood is all over the camp, and like you didn't know that you did it. You just like woke up and it happened. And like I said, you can't make a check or anything. You can't make a choice that avoids this. And so it was real upsetting. And so like you do have some options at that point where you're like, try to hide the body. Go ahead and just fess up to your companions, or like there's different options like that. So yeah, that was really hard to get past. But the first thing that you actually come across is so Gale the wizard. When you find him in the game, he's actually stuck in like this arcane sigil that it's like a fast travel point in the game. And so, but one of them is sort of malfunctioning, and he's stuck in it, and his hand pops out of it. And so he's like, "A hand, please," And so like you normally just have to go over there, pull him through it. And so with the Dark Urge, you have an option that it's like, fantasize about cutting off the hand, and if you pick that option, you just do it. You just cut off his hand, and then you have Gale's hand in your inventory. So that's the kind of stuff that happens, and which you can indulge in or not. And just to go full spoilers, so turns out Dark Urge is actually also like a son of Baal, the god of murder, and one of the main villains is a shapeshifter called Orin. And basically, it's like she was jealous of you, and she like fucked with your brain to like make you lose your memories. So like you don't, that's how you kind of start amnesiac. And so then you have to like kind of come to a head, and then like when you fight her, you have to then decide, are you going to embrace Baal, or are you going to rebuff him? And so it's really cool, all of the choices that you get to make in that in that storyline. So it's well worth playing, even if you're like evil averse as I was.
Well, and I thought, I mean, I just read what the story was of Baldur's Gate, but it sounds pretty cool because the basic setup of the first game is that Baal, there was this prophecy. So there's Baal, this evil god of murder, and there was this prophecy that he was going to be defeated and imprisoned. And so as a contingency plan against this, he just went around, having all sorts of children called Baal spawn in the hopes that one of them in the future would come back and rescue him after he was imprisoned. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was kind of a cool setup for a game.
Yeah, and I guess the Dead Three are, so it's Baal, the god of murder, Merkel, the god of I think just death, and then what's the other one? Baal, Merkel, Baal, Merkel. Oh, and Bane. Baal, Merkel, and Bane. Bane. One. I can't remember what they're all the gods of Evil Dead shit, whatever. But so they're called the Dead Three, and like they've been, I think they were also featured in like maybe Baldur's Gate 2, like if only Baal is in Baldur's Gate 1. But it's like in the game, even they talk about, it's like, oh, the Dead Three. It's always the Dead Three, But it's really cool because it's like in the, so there's three main villains, and so like one of them is another guy from the previous Baldur's Gate games named Ketheric Thorm, and now he's a Merkel worshiper. And so you end up having to fight like the avatar of Merkel, which is really dope. And then Gortash is like a politician, and he's a worshiper of Bane, and he's one of the other villains. And then Orin is the shapeshifter, worshiper of Baal, who she's his avatar. And I just have to say though, too, by the way, in terms of like praise, the voice actress who does Orin's voice is so perfect, and whoever wrote her dialogue, well done. this is how I turned my weakness into a strength. I've been so obsessed with this game. At a certain point, I was like, God, I got to stop playing it. I got to get some work done. And so I started a while ago. I started using a text to speech program to like take text stories and make them into audio so that I can listen to them. And I've gotten it to work pretty good. So I can sit there and like listen to things and do something else. And so I was like, okay, I've played Baldur's Gate enough that like I don't really need any of the dialogue or anything. I mean, much as it pains me not to hear all the great voice acting, but I've heard it all before and I still want to play it. So I now can sit at the computer all day playing Baldur's Gate, but then also get a lot of work done. But so even though I'm doing that, like when Orin comes on the screen and she has like her juiciest lines, well, I'm going to pause that shit. I'm going to listen to her talk again because it's like, I mean, she's so fucked up. She says such ridiculous stuff. It's just so over the top. It's great. But yeah, so.
Yeah, I remember. I listened to an interview with Adam Smith, and he was saying, I forget which writer. They kind of like sort of assign writers to each characters, and like then they edit them and stuff. But each person is sort of responsible for the voice of one or more particular characters. And I remember like the person who was writing Orin, had written some like sample. This is in the very early stages. And she's like, I don't know if this works or not. What do you think? And he's like, oh yeah, this is perfect. Go with this. And it was very like focusing on the blood and guts and the morbidity and stuff like that. And so he said he came back to her cubicle later or something, and she had this whole list of like medical terms and stuff, some stuff. And and she was like, this is my Orin file. Like I hope nobody like thinks that this is my personal,
right.
They understand that this is work and stuff. Actually, but though before we get too far away from the old Baldur's Gate games, there were like one or two other things I wanted to mention. So one was, I thought this was a really interesting quote from Chris Avellone. He says, the developers who worked on Baldur's Gate loved D&D. They played it, embraced it, and I think part of the charm of Baldur's Gate was that they let the characters they had played in their own campaigns appear and be part of the story in Baldur's Gate. Because they'd had a chance to play those characters for many years, it gave them an established look and feel, a sense of history, and a sense of actually being those characters and knowing their relationships with others in the party. So I thought that was cool, that they, that the characters, had been developed for years before the game. And then another thing I thought was just funny, you mentioned the enhanced edition. So I think it was Trent Oster said that when they went to make the enhanced editions, that the cobblestones in the original Baldur's Gate was just a photo of coffee beans. And the graphics were so low resolution, it just looked like cobblestones. But then when they up-res them, you just look at it and you're like, those look like coffee beans, So they had to completely redo the cobblestones for the enhanced edition.
Nice. So I just wanted to say too about the old Baldur's Gate game. So I mentioned how Jaheira is a character in that game, and like so in Baldur's Gate 3, she's like she's already a legendary hero. She saved Baldur's Gate a number of times, and you meet her in Act 2 of the game. And she helps you fight against the first main villain, which is Ketheric Thorm. So the thing is, like, her AI is pretty bad. Like, and actually, that's one of the other complaints in general, which we can talk about more later. But so her AI is pretty bad. It's very easy for her to get killed in the assault on Moonrise Towers, which is where you fight Ketheric Thorm. Just because she does like ridiculous, stupid shit. It's like she's a druid. She'll cast Ice Storm on top of allies and stuff, and then it turns the floor icy. Not as bad as Sleet Storm, but it does turn the floor icy. And then she runs into it, and then she slips and falls. So it's like, okay, what are you doing? And then she gets killed a lot because she has low armor class and not that many hit points. And there's some real bad dudes in that first fight. So it's easy for her to get killed. If she does get killed, no one ever says anything about her ever again. So, well, with one minor exception, but like, you can fight Ketheric Thorm, you kill him, everyone's celebrating, you go downstairs in Moonrise Towers. Like it's like a reunion. Like, some of your allies are over here. There's a bunch of Harpers there, assuming you didn't get them all killed. But there's a bunch of Harpers there, whatever. None of them say anything. Now, they're not full-fledged characters, but still, none of them say anything. There's no person that's like, okay, well, now that Jaheira's dead, I have to step up and take her place. I can give you some information that Jaheira might have given you. Or, alas, we shall miss Jaheira, this great hero, whatever. So nobody says anything. There's also, so that bard that I mentioned earlier, if you're not a Dark Urge and you didn't kill her, she's also there. And she's like trying to write a song to make the kids feel better, the tiefling kids, because one of their friends got taken and wasn't found. And so I'm like, hey, could you maybe write a song about the great Jaheira who's fallen, the legendary hero of Baldur's Gate, who, she used to sit like 10 feet away from you at the Last Light Inn where we found y'all. And it's like, it's just ridiculous that they never mention her. So there's that. And then, so she's your main way of getting a quest to find Minsc, who's another character in the game. That's who Matt Mercer voices, and he's fantastic. He's a hilarious character. Like, you should definitely try to get Minsc as soon as you can, but you don't get him until late in the game in Act 3.
I guess maybe we should just say, if anyone doesn't know, that Matt Mercer is the dungeon master for the very popular Critical Role, like Dungeons and Dragons, like video series kind of.
Yeah. He's also like a vocal chameleon, a voice actor, and he's voiced a lot of like, just done a lot of voice acting like in cartoons and stuff like that. So he voices Minsc, and both of them like being compatriots for a long time in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and all that. So if she's dead, you can still get that quest and you can still go find Minsc. But then if you don't have Jaheira with you, you have no choice but to kill him. Like, you can knock him out, and then when he wakes up after the combat is over, he then tries to kill you, and you have no choice but to kill him. I'm like, come on, really? Like, can I talk to him? I mean, he's unreasonable for sure, and he has a tadpole, and he's he's not in his right mind. But like, can I talk to him? So like, you have to kill him, and then Boo is there being all sad. Boo being his miniature giant space hamster companion, which sounds ridiculous, but it's totally adorable. Having played with Minsc as a companion and had Boo as his companion in the game, it's like, it's so cute and they're so adorable together, to like then have to kill him when you didn't want to. It's just real sad. Like, we should get to save him. Come on.
All right, so we're almost out of time, and I feel like we can't wrap up this conversation without mentioning bear sex.
Yeah.
Did you encounter any bear sex in any of your playthroughs?
Yeah, so there's a druid that you have to save from early on, and he eventually becomes a companion, and you can have sex with him, and he's pretty horny too, and he's into polyamory. So he's like, if your romantic partner's down, I'm down, which is nice that they have that at least as an option. Most of them are monogamous though. But so he's down, and so you can have the sex scene, and in the middle of it, he kind of accidentally turns into his bear form, because it's like he got so excited he turned into bear form. And you have the option then of saying like, no, that was cool, but I'd rather have you as a man, But then you also have the option of like, oh no, I liked it. I feel like I should have done it. I should have done the I liked it for the experience of it, but I said no. Let's just stay a man. So I shied away from it when I shouldn't have. But I think more importantly, you can have mind flayer sex. So the dream companion I mentioned, eventually turns out to be a mind flayer, and then at some point they flirt with you, and you can reciprocate or not. And if you go for it, there's like a sex scene, there's like tentacles wrapping around your head when it happens. At some point your character's like, you're like looking for the mouth. You're like, where even is the mouth? And then you're like, oh, there it is. And it's just like horrifying. It's like, it's just full of like sharp teeth that they use to like bite into skulls to eat the brains, but when you're doing that one, also you can chicken out and say like, oh, I'd actually rather have your other form, because the mind flayer offers like, the dream visitor form. And damn it, I should have just said stay mind flayer, but I didn't. And I haven't pursued it again since then. I should do it again sometime.
It's funny with the bear sex though, because they showed that at a pre-release publicity event kind of thing. Yeah. And I saw one commentator said like they got like more free publicity out of this than anything they could have, because like you just had all these sites that never would have normally published or covered a CRPG. Being like, in Baldur's Gate 3, you can have sex with a bear. And it was like just like all over the place. It was like millions of dollars worth of free advertising.
That is one thing that I knew about the game beforehand. That was one expectation I had. I definitely expected that I could have sex with a bear if I wanted to. I mean, I knew it was a druid, but still. Like I'm not interested in having sex with just bears, but if it's a druid, then maybe at least we can talk about it. You know,
it was so funny to the scene because like the bear kind of leans in with a sort of like seductive look, and it's really, really funny.
Yeah. Oh, but speaking of bears, the animals in this game are amazing, and this is a Larian thing, I guess. Like this is the same in the Divinity games, but like you have to have speak with animals in this game, or at least stock up on the animal speaking potions, and you just have to talk to every damn animal you see because they all have something to say. They're all adorable. Some of them are just absolutely not to be missed. So yeah, just talk to every animal you see for sure.
Well, that was something I saw Swen Vincke said. That part of their design philosophy is if they put a spell in the game, it has to actually be in the game. If you can talk with animals, you have to actually be able to talk with animals. Yeah. And there was one like Talk with Dead. And he said that was another one. It was just like a ton of work to implement this one spell. And so he's absolutely. Like, the out that we gave ourselves was that if someone's been beheaded, you can't talk with them. So that's why there's so many beheaded, like decapitated corpses in the game, because it was like cutting down on the amount of writing we had to do. They did a lot of work on Speak with Dead because it's like if a body is too damaged, also you can't talk to it, and sometimes you have to like disguise self before you can talk to them because like the corpse won't talk to their killer. So they did so much interesting stuff with that. There was another thing where they wanted to implement dispel magic, and like they kept it in the design for a long, long time because they really wanted it in there. But he's like, in the end, we just had to cut it out because like it literally would have been twice as much work to make the game with that one spell as not, because there's like so much magic in the game, and like giving you the option of dispelling it anywhere you want, and then like trying to make everything work. He was like, it just became unfeasible or infeasible.
Yeah. So since we're running out of time, I just want to mention some other quick, complaints. But like, so one thing is that like a lot of stuff doesn't work like you think it should. And like, whether it's bugs or it's like, it's just not explained properly. Like an item says that it makes it so you can't be stunned, but I was still getting stunned while wearing it. I think they patched that one since then, but there was a lot of stuff like that. Also, then the AI, like I mentioned, the AI being really bad with Jaheira in that Moonrise fight. But then the also infamous AI is you have to go to this foundry where they make these giant like automatons called Steel Watchers, and like you have to go in there and you have to blow it up. And you're trying to save these Gondian inventors, Gond being a god in Forgotten Realms, and they're gnomes and they worship this god Gond. I assume they say Gond damn it when they get mad. But so you have to go save them, and it's this really gnarly fight. Like it's so hard, and they just make it so much more difficult because they're just completely suicidal. Like they'll run away from the bad guys, provoking attacks of opportunity, and then they misty step back right where they were. It's like, bitch, if you're gonna misty step, get out of combat that way, and don't come back. The heroes are here to save you. Why are you doing this? The worst example was I just had it happen to me. Like we had completely won the encounter. We were just waiting for this one Steel Watcher to explode because they take a certain amount of damage and then they detonate, right? And so all we had to do was wait for its turn to come. And this motherfucker, he shoots a firebolt at this fucking explosive barrel, and it explodes him, a couple of his buddies, some of my party, the Steel Watcher, and it just sets off this enormous explosion. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And I know they've worked on this AI for them, but man, it still needs work.
Yeah, well, with a game this complicated, I'm sure they could work on it for the next 10 years, and there would still be like stuff go. At a certain point, you just have to declare it's done.
Yeah,
sort of like with
AI, the AI allies are sometimes not worth all the effort to have on your team.
Yeah, I mean that's true of many, many, many video games.
Yeah.
And sort of like at this podcast, we have to declare it's done at some point, even though we could talk about Baldur's Gate 3 for hours. I guess one other thing I want to mention before we go is that one of the major characters in this game is a Githyanki, which are, I don't know, they're like sort of like elf/lizard, interdimensional elf/lizards. Is that a fairly accurate description?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, kind of. People tend to call them like Toad. They make Toad references, but like in terms of their look. But they're in that area. So
do you know the history of the Githyanki?
I know they were created by Charles Strauss.
Yeah. So it's a term. It comes from George R. R. Martin's novel *Dying of the Light*.
Oh. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's like a sort of a alien race who I think you don't really see. I think they've gone extinct at the time the story happens. It's been a long time since I read that book. But anyway, Charles Stross, I think when he was a teenager, read it and was like, oh, that's a cool name, and used it for a submission that he made to White Dwarf magazine.
Yeah.
And, it was a big hit, and it got included in the Fiend Folio and was actually on the cover of the Fiend Folio.
Yeah.
All without anyone... I think without George R. R. Martin knowing about it. But apparently he doesn't, at least he's never complained that I know of. But it's just kind of cool to me that you have this like huge character in this huge game now that comes from, a throwaway line in a George R. R. Martin novel from 1977 or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually the Githyanki companion in this game, Lae'zel, is really awesome. And it's like, because it's such an alien culture to like, just to humans and elves and stuff. And to experience it through like, with her at your side and having this completely different worldview, it's super cool. And like, they're like the experts at fighting mind flayers. So it's also good from that point of view. A lot of people complain about them being ugly, but I don't know what they're talking about. I mean, They have their noses are kind of weird, but I mean, Lae'zel's hot.
Yeah, and it is a romanceable character in the game.
Yeah. Oh, and actually her romance is actually hilarious because like the first time it happened for me, it's like we had just like fought the goblin camp, and like so we killed a lot of fucking goblins at this goblin camp, right? And so we go back to camp, her face is all covered in blood, and like when you go to talk to her, she's like panting because it's like she's just like she's all revved up after all that killing. It's like, and so she was just like she was DTF at that point, and it was on from there. So. And like the romance with her is often like that. Like you have to duel her at one point, to like prove your mettle with her. And like you can kind of like be, like sort of aggressive in your responses to her sometimes. And she actually likes it, so it's like, it's just kind of a whole new approach.
Yeah. Well, she does have this really like alluring, sultry voice.
Yeah.
I watched some interviews with the actress. It's Devora something.
Yeah.
And it's she's really into it, really gets into the character. And I mean, one thing that because there's so many lines of dialogue in this game, they were recording dialogue for years and years and years. So these voice actors, have lived with these characters for such a long time. Like most of the time with voice acting, they just go in for like a couple of days or something. And this was a much different experience than that for these actors.
Yeah. One of the funny things with Lae'zel is that, she's so serious. But even with her being so serious, sometimes it's funny. Like she's telling you about like the history of Prince Orpheus, which is like Gith's first son, like the mother of the Githyanki. And like now they're ruled by this Lich Queen, Blackith. And Lae'zel is like all in on Blackith. She's her, her minion, whatever, like her whatever, her worshiper, But then like Orpheus is a threat to Blackith's reign, and so like she's telling you about the history of the Githyanki and Orpheus and Gith and Blackith and all that, and then so she says that Blackith is actually like the 157th Blackith to hold that title, but then she's been Blackith for like 1,000 years or something. And so one of the things you can say in response is, that's a lot of Blackiths. And she just very seriously says, yes. In that way that she does. And then she just goes on. And it's like, it's just fucking hilarious. And I don't know if they meant it to be, but it just is.
Yeah. Well, see, that's an example of humor that doesn't involve breaking the fourth wall.
True. Oh, and just real quick, one other minor complaint I have is with the names in the game. So like, for instance, Orpheus, like I feel like that's a dumb name for like a Yankee prince. And I think he's original to this game. I don't think he's from Forgotten Realms lore. Because like Orpheus, it's like a Shakespearean sounding name, like it doesn't seem like that should be a Githyanki name. Because like,
well, that's from Greek mythology.
Oh, from Greek mythology. Okay, well, I knew it was from something. But so
he's like the great musician who goes into the underworld to get his.
Right. So that makes it even worse then, really, because then you're like kind of mixing your metaphors, because there is like underworld shit in the game, like you can literally go to the hells, and all that. But so like Orpheus just feels like a wrong name for him, because like Lae'zel is like a great Githyanki name, and like there's other ones in there that are good. But then But then also, so the big devil antagonist in the game is named Raphael, and it's like, okay, Raphael, okay. I mean, like the devils have a lot of cool names, like, and Raphael just isn't up to snuff, to me. And he's such a cool character otherwise. Like, and so the music we were talking about earlier that was badass was the devil music you mentioned. It's like it's in the fight with him, and it's so fucking epic. And so like you have this sort of angelic vocal happening, and like this orchestral swell in the background, and then this motherfucker starts like spoken word singing his own song like a Disney villain. It's so great, and the song is just so dope and unexpected. But what I was going to say earlier is that if you cast silence on him, which ostensibly you would cast on him to make him not cast spells, it makes him stop singing. They actually thought of that. You can cast silence on him and make him stop singing. I take that as gospel from the internet. I didn't actually try it, but
because I saw if he's dead at that somehow. I'm pretty sure if he's dead somehow, like then it plays the song but without his lyrics, but with the rest of the lyrics.
Oh, maybe, yeah, right, yeah. Because I mean, there are other lyrics that he doesn't sing. So, but yeah, that makes sense too. I never noticed that part, but yeah, I did read that if you cast silence, he stops singing. And then, so otherwise with names though, just like some of them, a lot of them are great in the game, including like names from throwaway characters that don't even have like that aren't even real characters. They're just like one-line characters. But then like the companions are Gale, Will, it's Wyll, but still it's just like it sounds like a real name. Shadowheart, which is like admittedly a made up name in game for her because of like the sort of cult of Shar that she's part of. And her real name is Genevieve, which I think is like a cool Forgotten Realms name. But you don't find that out until the end of the game, and she never uses it. She always goes by Shadowheart, and it's just like so emo that it's like it's hard to take seriously. And the internet calls her Shart for short, and which is perfect. I mean, it's just hilarious. But it's just I just feel like they could have done better with some of those names because like I don't like names that feel like real world names in like D&D. Like I want them to come up with cool made up names that you wouldn't normally encounter in the real world. So yeah, that's my minor complaint.
Well, that reminds me. I mean, I don't know how fair this is, but one of the criticisms I saw that I thought was funny is this person says, "It feels like a college dating sim, not an RPG. Every character has an upper middle class San Francisco beach party vibe."
Okay, sure. I guess that's fair. I mean, I wouldn't say Karlach does, but I mean, I guess she kind of has a very upbeat personality, even though she just got back from being a servant in the hells. But yeah, okay, I can see that. I mean, Lizelle doesn't certainly, but yeah, there is that certain vibe to it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it does seem like it has like a little bit more of a like fun, approachable party vibe than a like grimdark, super serious.
True. Well, I will say that most of the companions are pretty prickly, especially like the first three that you would normally find. Like the first three you would find are like Shadowheart, Lizelle, and Astarion, and they're all three real prickly. And so like it takes, and then I mean you can get Gale just as early as them basically. But like, and he's just always nice and like polite. I mean, he's fairly full of himself, but he's not prickly like them. And then the next one you would get is Will, and he's just real nice. He's a champion, a hero of the people, a real do-gooder. And so like, he's not prickly, but like those first couple you get, like, yeah, man, they're like, Shadowheart's just real in your face about stuff. Lizelle's like, real militant. Astarion's a rogue and a vampire, which you find out pretty early on. But the first thing he does to you is hold a knife to your throat. And he's just kind of a Cerbric, and stuff. And he stays that way forever. But Shadowheart, eventually you can crack her heart and get into the juicy innards. But it takes a while.
So you think people should play this game?
Absolutely. I mean, do be careful if you have deadlines, or if you want to maintain relationships and stuff, and like you care about like spending time with other people. Although you can play it multiplayer. I have not done that yet, and it makes me sad. I do want to play it multiplayer because it's a whole other way of experiencing it. I'm sure. I couldn't get.
Yeah, you can play couch co-op. I understand.
Yeah. And you could do that, or you can play it online, like if you just have separate systems or whatever. But yeah, you can play it couch co-op. So I mean, it's absolutely an amazing game. I think it's, it's like I said, I think it's the best game I've ever played. I think it's one of the best, pieces of entertainment I've ever experienced, for sure. I can't think of another thing that I've ever spent this much time on and been this obsessed with. I mean, except for D&D itself. And the downside of this, of course, is that I can experience the full game at any time and no one can stop me. Whereas D&D, it's like to actually play D&D, I need a bunch of people. I need to get aligned schedules. It's complicated, and I have a lot of games on my schedule, but it's like in between, all I can do is like fuck around with like making builds and things, and it's like that has limited fun. It's like it is fun, but it's just like a placeholder until I can play D&D. Baldur's Gate I can just turn on any time, so it's very dangerous.
Yeah, and don't you play D&D like 3 times a week, right?
Yeah, at least more than that. Yeah. Typically, yeah. I have a lot of games going. I do have another game that's spinning up now. Like I have a game on alternate Sundays, and then now the other alternate Sunday, I have a different game now spinning up, and I'm going to play, the brother of a character in the game named Popper, who's a kobold. He's actually, I should mention, Popper is like my favorite character. He's a bit character. You meet him in Act 3 at the circus. He's just a merchant. He has very limited, interactions, but he's so delightful. I just love him so much. And like, this is a sentiment much shared on the internet. But so because I felt like there was no justice for Popper, we don't get him enough. He should be a companion, damn it. I decided like, I was going to make a character that was basically his brother, so that I could act like Popper in the game and like, expand from what I've seen in Baldur's Gate 3. So, I'll have to update you on how that goes.
All right, so we should definitely wrap this up. Again, if anyone wants to buy me a PS5, that would be very appreciated. John, any other final thoughts? Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for listening to my job application for Larian Studios. So I thank everybody. This has demonstrated my extreme commitment to Baldur's Gate 3. I've thought about it at a very deep level. I have lots of useful insights that I could offer if wanted. I want to be part of this team, man. Like, come on, give me a call. Yeah, definitely. If anyone has any contacts at Larian Studios, let them know about John, because he is. This would definitely be his dream job. My agent actually did reach out to them on my behalf. So there is an email in their queue, but I don't know if anyone's going to read it or not. So if anybody does have a bestie over there, But yeah, and again, I'm sure John could talk about Baldur's Gate 3 for another 10 hours, but. We need to, this is getting pretty long, so I think we'll need to wrap this up here. So again, we've been speaking with John Joseph Adams about this awesome new game everyone should check out, Baldur's Gate 3. So John, thank you so much for joining us. Always good to be here. I'm going to go play Baldur's Gate 3 now. And that was our interview. So big thanks again to John Joseph Adams for joining us on the show. This episode of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy was made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoyed the show and want it to continue, please support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/geeks or via PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. Alright, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your host, visit davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.